what I would do is I would take the plan, note down the number in the bottom right cell, which is probably your revenue number. And then I would go into the assumption sheet. I can promise you there's always an assumption sheet. It might be hidden. You need to unhide it.
Yeah, it takes, I wouldn't say hours, I would probably say days.
Yeah. But there's somewhere is an assumption sheet and some stuff built in. And then you dial all of this down to your last year's achievements. Again, conversion rate, ACV, and so forth. And then you compare the new number that will be on the revenue side, and you will have a gap between those two numbers. Yeah. And the way I would describe that gap is, hey, all of this here is based on assumptions. All of this needs to go right in order to achieve this, right? And I think what is really powerful to then go to the CEO and say, did you know that 40%, 50% of next year's revenue is based on a set of assumptions?
Yeah.
And she might say, actually, I didn't. Because the funny thing is there's obviously lots of trust between finance and the CEO, and that's also good. It should be like that. But it doesn't always mean that the CEO is deep down into the spreadsheet and understands everything that's going on. Then shouldn't even be expected of him or her. But by you taking out that one number, you basically tell your CEO, hey, this is the risk threshold that we're dealing with. Yeah. Are you aware of that? Yeah. And then the answer could be yes or no. I think another way then to potentially kind of go one level deeper here is to start differentiating between assumptions. Those are sometimes I call it is wishful thinking of what's going to happen in the future without any work or resources put into this, versus what you would usually call projects or campaigns or something like that, right? Where you basically say, like, in order to achieve that conversion rate, X, Y, and Z needs to happen, right? If you have a conversion rate that magically goes up, I would call this an assumption. If you have a conversion rate that goes up because you're planning those three things and you're starting to do them now and you expect the conversion rate to happen in May, the increase happen in May, that's what I would rather call a project. Yeah. And those two things have kind of different risk profiles, especially for me as a CEO. I would really like to understand how much of my plan is assumption-based and how much of my plan actually is real-world, reality-based, right? And again, what I would assume, because sometimes some of this planning, especially if it's leaning on the unachievable end, it's a little bit happens in a silo. It happens a little bit in the corner office. It happens a little bit between 2-3 people. So I highly doubt that many of those assumptions are project supported, which basically will mean that most of the stuff that you just calculated in terms of, hey, those are the revenue at risk on the assumption side will be very similar to the revenue at risk of the assumption side minus the projects, right? Again, this is a way to show to the CEO, listen, this is going to be really, really, really difficult and probably actually not going to happen.
But I think what's also important here is it doesn't always have to be that you change the metrics part of the plan, as long as you can then back it up with the projects instead.